When I started hanging with girls, I had to learn that, oh, the right way to behave around women is the same way you behave around men, because your behavior around men should not be unacceptable around women. Uh, because if that's the case, there is an issue with your behavior, not with the social environment. Um, and that was something I learned. Um, I didn't know it, and that was probably because I existed in a consequence-free social environment up to that point.
Okay, I'm just gonna say it. All boys schools are a breeding ground for misogyny and sexist behavior. Okay, so hear me out on this, okay? I went to a co-ed school in a town in Ireland, and when I think back to my experience with the opposite sex, you know, it's not great, right? You know, the sexist behavior, comment, objectifying, and that was all like to my face, and like I could experience that one-on-one. So me, when I think about what must go on behind my back, you know, but these are all like assumptions, you know, I could never know because I didn't go to an all boys school. But this is what this video is for, okay? I'm doing my research. I was really interested in it. I wanted to know education is an integral part in the development of young Irish minds. You know, through your teen years, you're at a very impressionable age. So what you're learning and what you're taking part in and the information you're consuming is all, you know? I'm also fully aware that single-sex schools have their benefits, you know, they're said to reap academic success in girls mainly, but also in boys. You get to know your own gender, I suppose, and you know plenty of other things. However, I'm inclined to believe that the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. I'm also not implying that all single-sex schools are like this. I'm just referring to facts and statistics I've collected from the internet and from people I know and from Instagram polls. And also I'm relying on personal experiences of people that I know that went to single-sex male schools and just going off what they have to say and their experiences. I also feel like some of the assumptions I would make about this are fair enough, given the overwhelming evidence. That didn't stop me from wanting to look further into it though, and what I found is interesting. I'm smiling a lot in this video too because I'm actually quite overwhelmed. This video also isn't meant to be an attack on men, so don't come for me. I'm also not using the education system in Ireland as an excuse for grown-ass men who are sexist. It's not for people to say, oh, you can't blame me for being sexist, it's how I was brought up. Because if you have eyes, ears, a brain, or literally even just Instagram, you should know better by now. So over a third of the schools in Ireland are same-sex, which is actually crazy. We have more students attending single-sex schools in this country than any other country in the Western world. I found this little bit from Reddit that I thought was quite funny. But yeah, that in itself is kind of nuts when you think about it. It's very normalized here to be attending a single-sex school, but I really took the time to sit down and think about how potentially damaging it is, and from speaking to a few people and doing some Instagram polls, which I will bring up on the screen later in this video, it is quite clear the negative implications and the negative effects that spending 6 years in a male-saturated environment in an already misogynistic society can have on impressionable boys from the ages of 12 to 18. I mean, realistically, how can you expect people to come out of 6 years, and in some cases 12 or 14 years, of having no interaction with the opposite sex? How can you expect to be normal? It's really impossible when you put it simply, and I just think that's a lot of baggage that people are carrying around and a lot they have to unlearn. And the problem is a lot of people aren't unlearning it. Don't want to, couldn't be bothered, I'm busy, do you know, that kind of way. Hi, it's me from a different time. I just wanted to quickly say that you won't really hear me mentioning issues surrounding the LGBTQ+ community in the Irish education system, just because I did originally have things I wanted to say in this video about it, but afterwards it just didn't seem like the right thing to do. Like, I didn't want to be skimming over it or saying things a bit passively about something that's so complex and deep-rooted. It is no surprise that the issues surrounding the LGBTQ plus community within the Irish education system is a whole can of worms, and that's not really something that I wanted to just like skim over. I also just don't feel like I am informed enough as of just yet on those matters to properly speak on them, and because of this I think I might just want to save it for a whole separate video. So it's getting really dark. Oh my god, no way. Is it better here? So yeah, I'm gonna be delving into what I found, and I guess I hope you enjoy. I don't know. So basically I put up 3 polls on Instagram starting out about sexual education in Irish schools, and I'll put them up on the screen here. But basically, you know, just the bare minimum, sex ed, and then looking at sexual health, consent, sexual relationships, sexual harassment, all those things. I put up a poll asking if people had been taught or informed about that stuff, and I did 3 polls, one for all boys, one for all girls, and one for co-ed schools. And I think the amount of interaction on each of the polls speaks for itself. It's safe to say that the ratio for boys who went to all boys schools that saw the story to how many actually interacted with it is somewhat expected and disappointing. It's weird as well because the ones that I thought would respond did, and the ones who I thought definitely wouldn't respond didn't. So the difference between the amount of girls that responded on this topic and the amount of boys did was just crazy. The numbers don't lie. There's just a general lack of interest there that's quite disappointing. And this is just off the polls from my Instagram, so I know that these aren't going to be very accurate, but I think, you know, they tell a lot. Like, sex ed was most commonly discussed in the co-ed schools, and then in the all-girls schools. Basically not at all in the boys' schools.
We, in the school I went to, I'm not going to name the school, there was no sexual education. Like, zero. I remember the girls' school doing a talk, like seminar kind of thing. They do like sexual education, and they like talk about different things, and they go through like sexual health and contraception and consent and all that kind of stuff. And I remember my girlfriend doing the talk in school, and she said, "Are you doing one?" And I was like, "No." And only a couple of years later, after we left school, we were in college and we were talking about it again, and I remember saying, "Yeah, we never did that." And like, both my girlfriend and I were completely shocked about how an all-boys school was never once spoken to about anything to do with sexual relationships. You'd swear like sexual relationships were based off one of the genders in that case, in terms of like male-female relationships. I just don't understand how you could turn and say, oh yeah, well, the girls' school can have this sex ed talk, but no, don't worry about the boys' school, they don't need it. Or whatever they thought was the reason we shouldn't have had that talk. Like, I genuinely think if I had had that talk, I would have reached the point I'm at now way earlier.
I think that I would have received a dramatically different sex education had there been men and women in the room, because it would have had to have been more objective, whereas I think we got just the between us men version, and I was old enough at the time to appreciate how fucking strange that was. It was just about protecting oneself. And that's how it was framed. That's how a woman getting pregnant was framed. It was framed as something that was bad for you. And that's how, like, abortion was framed in this really weird moralistic light that I think is obvious when you went to like a Catholic school. I did not hear the word consent at all at any point in it. That was not, most certainly not a part of it. God knows that was not a part of it.
In like your sexual education and stuff, mentioned that like the word consent was not breathed. Like,
Yeah.
like would that be the same in your?
For sure, yeah, 100%. Like, your understanding for like rape is as well is like so narrow, do you know? Like,
It's like, oh, serial killers do it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just like the most. It just doesn't exist in our reality or something like that, you know. Oh, you'll never be in a situation where consent is an issue. Like, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but consent was never mentioned, uttered.
Some people were also kind enough to get in my DMs and elaborate. I'm going to read out some of those because, oof, it's rough. So I'll be leaving out the names of the schools and their identities, like these people's identities. So this is someone who went to an all-boys school, a Christian Brothers, in Ireland. And this is what they had to say about what they were taught on consent and sexual relationships. Here we go. This one's a personal favourite of mine, actually. My only experience in said school of being informed not to sexually assault women was in TY when an ex-cop martial arts teacher came into our school, showed us how to supposedly break a person's arm, and then sat us down for guy talk and delivered a very blanket "rape is bad" monologue. This was entirely in relation to his experience as a cop dealing with violent serial rapists and in no way covered consent, alcohol, or the nuances of sexual assault. He then said that if anyone ever raped his daughter, he would murder that person, and proceeded to tell us that if we raped a girl, her father would kill us and we had it coming, and that was pretty much the only reason he gave us not to be rapists. Lots to unpack there. See, the impression I got from that was someone was brought in to explain rape to boys in a way that boys would appreciate, not in like a realistic way. It's kind of like, don't sexually harass people because God forbid you'll have to pay consequences, and no one wants that, you know? That would be so much hassle. Not great, is it? Not great. He also added, also during the Paddy Jackson case, we discussed it in our religion class and we were essentially told that since the court deemed him not guilty, so should we. Our teacher said nothing about the victim's underwear being used as evidence, her being attacked by the media. A lot of emphasis was placed on how she might have ruined Paddy Jackson's career. That is what we're dealing with. Someone else said that in their all-boys school, not in the slightest was it mentioned. I remember a day when the main girls' school did a sex ed seminar, and in 6 years there was never a mention of it or anything like it in the school I went to. A sexual education, the bare minimum, was never addressed. That actually shocked me, and like a good few people messaged me saying this, and that actually shocked me because I didn't actually think that there would be no sex education in a school. That could be naive of me, but I thought that they would have done like the stupid bare minimum, like play a DVD, you know, like how to make a baby after marriage type shit. But like, is it illegal to not teach young people what sex is at all? Are they really just like not bringing it up until the age of 18? Like people are just never going to hear about it. I feel like the school are like, oh, their parents will tell them. And then the parents are like, oh, the school will tell them. Also, I'm laughing about this because if I don't, I will scream. Also, the fact that it's like the girls' school's responsibility to educate the boys' school, that seems to be like an overwhelming fact, is that in all girls' schools it seems that, you know, it's all about like academic achievement, it's all about discipline, control, what you wear, what you look like, how you behave. And in all boys' schools it seems to be a bit of a free-for-all. Like the discipline doesn't seem to be there in the same way from what I've heard and what I've read online, as in studies and articles, and from what I've heard from my boyfriend and like a good few people that I know who attended all boys schools. It all seems to be the same.
And there's a few like particular stories that like come to light, and it's only after you kind of like realize how fucking like weird they were. Whoever was teaching us was kind of like a religion teacher or something like that. I'm not sure, was he a priest now exactly, but he was definitely in there with the lads, like the ordained lads, you know. He like sat us down, and like the whole class he was just like chatting away, and then he just out of the blue just goes, okay, I'm gonna go around to everyone in the class and you have to like tell me what you like in women, like what you like about women. I'm like oh my god, like he was framing it in terms of like what you physically like about women, you know, like what you're attracted to or whatever physically. And of course, like 60,
you know, like the important things.
Yeah, the important things, like all the other like personality shit and all that. That's only fucking nonsense talk. Anyway, I knew that from young. Like, of course, like when you're 16 or you're 15, like lads are trying to play the big boy, and they go like, oh fucking ash, all this, you know. But like shit like that would go on like all the time, you know, like even with teachers and stuff is what I'm trying to say, like that.
That was just totally introduced and brought on and encouraged by this like teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and this guy is also just like 50 or something, you know. and we're like 16, and he's like asking young fellas like that are like underage, like, you know.
And he's also asking what ye like
What we
in
like, yeah.
underage girls.
Exactly,
Like, that's so weird.
When I think about like my earliest experiences of hearing conversations about women and about girls by my peers, by lads in my year who would have been hanging out with girls before me, they would have been passively, not like nefariously or maliciously, just passively and obviously, misogynistic in nature. And they would have never spoken like that around the girls in question because there would have been a social repercussion, right? The male dominated school environment 100% reinforced that. I do occasionally have to think about it and be like, am I definitely not behaving in a way that reflects how insular that social environment was growing up?
If I had been in a mixed school, I don't think that would have been eradicated. I do think that would have gone on still, but there may have been a more of an element of respect in terms of like people tend to say less things about someone to their face and more about someone behind their back. And I feel like it kind of carries across in the same way, as in you wouldn't comment on a girl who's standing right in front of you. And if you do, like, that's pretty messed up. The problem is there's so many people out there that do. And it comes from being able to express these opinions and express these views of women behind their back because there's no women around. Because these mentalities are formed behind someone's back and practiced in front of their face.
Like there was other things like, you know, like with female teachers and stuff, like where guys would be really like on the border of like harassment, like even like physical harassment in a lot of ways.
One thing that was strange in like a boys' school is like any female teacher was the only female people saw from one end of the day to the other, and it was always like, who's the best looking teacher and who's the best looking person, like female in the school and all that kind of stuff. And that culture is not a good one. But I never ever realized that it was a strange view to have or an issue to have until I left school, which is the crux of the problem. And things get out of hand, but as I said, like until you leave that environment, like an all boys environment full of masculinity, toxic masculinity, all that kind of stuff, you don't realize how like shaped your view was just from being in that environment. You gain this mentality of like the opposite sex and the attraction to the opposite sex and like the things that go along with that, and like in extreme cases the entitlement to engage with the opposite sex, and the in more extreme cases the like fury and the like anger that can instill in people when they don't receive that back. And that's like definitely something that stems from this toxic like schoolboy chats and conversations and views of like sexual relationships and sex and all that kind of stuff. It can be very, very damaging to like young kids.
My battery died. Like there is like a herd mentality, a herd sexist mentality that you can imagine exists in an all boys school. And if those people are never told that that's wrong or that's disrespectful or you can't behave that way and you can't think that way and that's just not the reality, then when they reach the age of 18 and they are still in that mindset, it's so much more difficult to unlearn it. And after 18 years, a lot of people are set in their ways and are not willing to unlearn it. And that's just the issue, That's one of the thousands of issues. My brain is just like scrambled eggs at this point. Oh, someone also said this gem. We had 2 sex education type classes, both of which just happened during Irish 1 week, classic, where we essentially were told, don't get anyone pregnant, STDs will kill you, and then how abortion was wrong. A lot of schools also seem to run external programs that like where, you know, people come in and speak on sexual health and sex education. But what also sucks is that so many of them are optional, and I've gotten messages of people saying that in their co-ed school these programs were optional and way less boys applied than girls did. What is the point? And some of the stories I am hearing about the things that go on, it's like a nightmare. Oh my god, if I woke up in the middle of an all-boys school, I just can't imagine coming out of a situation like that and going into the real world. How you perceive things is so warped compared to like anything else. And I'm not saying at all that co-ed schools are perfect, because they are far from it. It's still shocking, you know, it's already bad enough there. But like, think about how bad the kind of sexism and misogyny is in co-ed schools, and then think about what is said in all boys schools where girls can't hear them. Firstly, I just think single-sex schools shouldn't exist. Research says that the academic results actually aren't that different, and it is a religious thing in Ireland. It just is, and like, there is just no good reason anymore. It works really well for certain individuals, but I just don't think next to the bigger picture it's worth it, especially if like certain behaviors aren't being discouraged and are actually being encouraged and labeled as boys will be boys. That's doing literally nothing for anyone. I don't know, like if you and your friends were in an all boys school and you weren't checked by staff and you weren't checking each other out of ignorance, then do yourself and all of us a favor and start doing it now. Get on it, like check yourself. Yeah, I know I focus a lot on issues in all boys schools, but I just think it's extremely relevant right now, and I totally am not disregarding the fact that these things exist in other schools. I know that. You know, I also went to schools outside of Ireland. I was like lucky enough to have experiences in different countries, and we're really just doing things in Irish schools though. Like, I'm gonna read out some Reddit bits. What do we got? All the lads I knew in my teens and 20s who went to all boys schools were really weird with girls, either shy but also mega creepy, flat out misogynistic and sexist, only seeing women as something to and shocked and antagonistic if they got into an argument with one. These guys are in their 30s now and still pretty weird about women. There also seems to be a whole thing about like, there are particular schools, all boys schools in Ireland, that are like known for this, which I think is interesting, that are like breeding it especially badly. So much to think about. Went to an all boys primary and secondary school in Dublin. I'd highly recommend going for a co-ed school for your kids. The amount of guys who came out of the all guys school who were either socially awkward around girls or were just with no respect for them was crazy. 4 out of 5 schools in my town are single sex schools, and I think it causes a bit of a problem with socialization. Someone said, having gone to an all-boys secondary school, it took me several years into adulthood to actually learn how to talk to women like a normal person. Shit sucked. In this article, it actually also says, it's more difficult to tackle gender inequality when you have a school system as segregated on gender lines as Ireland. And that's a fact. It was actually kind of sad how many articles I came across about people trying to find that like gender balance in their life after going to primary school and secondary school of the same sex. It's such a weird problem to have. And this article from the Irish Times also says, as per the history books, segregation of the human race in all its forms has not proved to be beneficial. There are the studies, of course, that show that girls who attend all girls schools reap academic benefits, but I would argue that our psychosocial development is stunted at the hands of this meritocratic system. I have barely like skimmed the surface on this topic in this video, but all you have to do is go online or talk to your friends and like really talk to them about it. If you went to an all boys school, observe your friends. Look at people who behaved particularly badly towards women and had weird ideas towards women when you were in school in your late teens. You know, look at them now and see. You know, I think there's a lot to say when you really look at someone and how they are with the opposite sex. Thanks to everyone who helped with this video. It was good to talk about and to have the conversation of such a weird part of our society, I think. And I just feel like not a lot of people talk about it. There are actually studies also that show that girls have a civilizing effect on boys when they're like working alongside each other every day, so much to think about. So, and this goes out to girls too, you know, like if you were brought up in an environment that supported and encouraged, you know, sexist behavior and misogyny the way that too many Irish schools do, just think about that and check yourself, check your friends. You're grown now. I mean, some of you are, I don't know. Okay, I have no idea what this video is going to come out like, but thank you to everyone for getting on to me and interacting with me and making me have an existential crisis. I'd love to make a video in the future going into more depth about this, because this wasn't, you know, I didn't really go very deep because I feel like the video would literally be 3 days long if I did. But yeah, maybe I'll do like segments or something, or like, you know, take different segments from things I've mentioned in this video and flesh them out into individual videos. Anyway, tell the girls in your life that you love them, that they're hot and sexy, but like in like a non-objectifying way.